Sterling came up to me and said, "Hey, could you do me a favor?" He's like, "I'm getting literal death threats about this, about..."
The tragic accident that killed Dale Earnhardt has baffled racing fans and experts for almost 20 years. What actually transpired at that critical juncture, and who was genuinely at fault? This is monumental because the most highly criticized member, Sterling Marlin, has finally spoken up, and he is 67 years old. His admission has the potential to shatter our preconceived notions about the worst day in NASCAR history. This is more than simply a tale of tragedy. It's also a quest for understanding and salvation. Would you want to hear the response now? Keep looking because the worst secret is going to come out. A day in February of 2001 was the day of the tragic race. Under the Florida sun, Daytona International Speedway shimmered, and the atmosphere was electric with the anticipation of thousands of fans. Every NASCAR driver's aim was to make their imprint in the Daytona 500, which was more than simply a race. That day, Dale Earnhardt had more at stake than a simple race. He had the chance to protect his reputation and show his support for Michael Waltrip, his teammate, and his son, Dale Earnhardt Jr. Even before the race started, the picture of Earnhardt addressing his crew with dogged expressions said it all. In addition to being a top-notch driver, he was a loyal team captain who prioritized the group's needs before his own. His pre-race speech, "This is a team sport. Today I want us to stand on top of the podium," was reminiscent of a renowned figure who fearlessly faced challenges. Hard labor had been put in by Earnhardt's crew in the days preceding the race. From the powerful engine to the faultless tire system, every aspect of the renowned No. 3 Chevrolet was painstakingly examined. Dale was prepared to dominate the track with lightning speed and pinpoint accuracy. Earnhardt has deep emotional ties to the Daytona 500. His 1998 victory there was a moment nobody would soon forget, the culmination of 20 years of dogged pursuit. He was no longer pressured to prove anything when the 2001 season started. He tried to avoid the track where so many greats had run their races, but his passion for the sport and his desire to make a difference kept drawing him back. There was an unseen force of pressure permeating the air at Daytona that day, in addition to the exhilaration. Drivers like Sterling Marlin and Jeff Gordon, who Dale knew would stop at nothing to win, were difficult opponents. The race was not just a story about speed, but a test of willpower and survival. We knew that if we wanted to beat Dale at Daytona, we had to prepare for everything. He was someone who never backed down, a rival claimed. Everyone was watching Dale Earnhardt as the vehicles cranked up the revs and the motors screamed down the course. His eyes, concealed by his helmet, exuded self-assurance, the conviction that he had the power to create an impact. But nobody, not even Dale, could have predicted that this race would be his final. Tragically, NASCAR's biggest race of all time took place on February 18, 2001, at the highly anticipated Daytona 500. In the last lap, Dale Earnhardt, nicknamed the Intimidator, had to do double duty as both driver and team protector. In the latter circuits of the race, he concentrated on keeping his son Dale Earnhardt Jr. and teammate Michael Waltrip in a safe position because they were leading. With speeds above 300 km/h, the driver's every action might decide their fate as they sprinted towards the finish line. As the race came to a close, Earnhardt, who was in third position, blocked hard to keep vehicles behind Waltrip and Jr. Suddenly, Sterling Marlin's car sped up behind Earnhardt's, and the two cars were involved in a minor crash. Earnhardt was pushed into Ken Schrader's vehicle after his car slipped off course due to that little accident. At turn 4, Earnhardt's vehicle slammed into the outside wall after the two cars collided aggressively, creating a dangerous angle. It may have seemed like a small accident from the stands or on TV, but the impact was catastrophic. The impact generated a force roughly 80 times greater than that of a human body at speeds above 160 miles per hour, about 257 km/h. The impact with the concrete wall caused Earnhardt's vehicle to almost halt. A deadly brain damage resulted from the impact's focal point on the front of the vehicle. Earnhardt was only able to survive the crash because he was belted in and covered by the most rudimentary safety equipment available at the time. The impact fractured his skull, and he died instantly. Safety measures were inadequate compared to what is required now. There was no mandate for the use of head and neck supports or other similar protective equipment at the time. The exterior barriers along the track were constructed of solid concrete and lacked the shock-absorbing layers used in more contemporary, safer energy reduction barriers built of steel and foam. Although it appeared to be a typical collision in a high-speed race at first glance, these elements significantly increased the crash's hazard. Following the incident, Earnhardt's vehicle lost traction and eventually stopped. Quickly getting out of his car, Ken Schrader, who had also been engaged in the incident, approached Earnhardt. But when Schrader peered inside, he saw that Earnhardt was in considerably worse shape than in any accident he had ever seen. Rescue and medical crews wasted little time getting to the area. Shortly thereafter, the Daytona racetrack was rocked by the confirmation of Dale Earnhardt's death. Just moments ago, the stadium had been alive with anticipation, but now the air was devoid of sound. The abrupt death of NASCAR's biggest star, who was once thought to be unbeatable on the track, shocked the fans. But then the criticism started flying, and Sterling Marlin, the guy many blame for being the closest witness and the tragedy's primary cause, was there in the middle of it all. What really transpired that day, and how did Marlin deal with the public's outrage? This story is contentious, so let's go into it. Sterling Marlin never thought that a tragedy as monumental as Dale Earnhardt's death would forever be associated with his legendary racing career. Marlin was hit hard by fans and media after the 2001 Daytona 500 crash, which claimed the life of a NASCAR great. He rose to prominence as a leading voice in the discussion of accountability and safety in this risky activity. News articles repeatedly mentioned Sterling Marlin in the days after the accident, with headlines suggesting, "Is Sterling Marlin responsible for the death of Dale Earnhardt?" Despite NASCAR's rapid confirmation that the collision was an accident, the public's anger remained unabated. Some of the supporters, overwhelmed by their sadness and wrath, laid the whole responsibility on Marlin. Marlin, a well-respected and seasoned driver, found himself unexpectedly under intense pressure from every direction. He was inundated with hateful correspondence, including death threats in the form of letters and SMS. Unfortunately, he realized that the fury expressed in these messages was directed against more than just him. It was a means for many to express their grief over the passing of a legendary figure. "I did everything I could to avoid the collision, but racing is a dangerous sport, and situations like this are sometimes unavoidable," he added. After the accident, Marlin decided to stay silent for a while. He refrained from offering explanations or responses to criticism because he knew that doing so would only serve to inflict further pain on the Earnhardt family, who had endured the most devastating loss. However, opting for silence was not a simple decision. Night after night, Marlin relived the events of that day, the accident. On other evenings, he couldn't get any sleep because he was so consumed by thoughts of failure and guilt. Could I have changed my actions to avoid that? No one could undo what had happened, yet he still felt guilty about it. Still, Sterling Marlin had company on his fight against this oppression. He was defended by his fellow racers and NASCAR authorities, who insisted that the crash was nobody's responsibility. As Earnhardt's death was not Marlin's or anyone else's fault, Earnhardt's main rival Jeff Gordon stated, "Sterling did nothing wrong. Every racer knows that collisions happen every day." Another crash victim, Ken Schrader, publicly defended Marlin. Sterling Marlin went about his business in a low-key manner as the years passed. He hoped he wouldn't damage anyone or cause further trouble. "I didn't want to hurt the Earnhardt family. They had lost too much," said the man. Those who understood allowed him to keep his dignity, but he suffered emotional wounds that would take time to heal. One of the worst days in NASCAR history, the day Dale Earnhardt died, was finally addressed by Sterling Marlin after more than 2 decades of quiet. Marlin finally broke his silence and revealed the long-buried narrative in a dimly lit room with a portrait of Earnhardt resting on the table. He remembered how the 2001 Daytona 500 disaster, which killed Earnhardt, rocked the racing industry to its foundations and confronted the anguish, criticism, and unsolved mysteries that followed. A series of unfortunate circumstances began when his car and Earnhardt's had a little accident at that same time. The NASCAR fan base quickly turned on Marlin, accusing him of being directly responsible for the Intimidator's death. Marlin could only respond weakly to the public outcry, saying, "It was an accident. I never wanted that to happen." But the fans still couldn't be calmed. Marlin silently withstood immense public relations pressure. The Earnhardt family and Dale's loved ones were more important than evading accountability. Thus, he chose to remain silent. Marlin expressed his profound regret as he explained, "I opted to keep mute and let time answer because I feared things would have grown worse if I spoke up." The terrors he endured, nevertheless, persisted despite the quiet. After a restless night of thinking about the tragedy, he began to question if there was anything he could have done to prevent the unfortunate result. The shame he felt persisted despite his knowledge that the crash was inevitable in a sport involving high speeds. There were nights I stayed awake, asking myself if I could have done anything differently, but the truth is, it was just an accident. "I never meant to hurt anyone, especially Dale," he said. A lack of safety precautions, such as the head and neck support device and adequate barrier walls, was the principal cause of Earnhardt's death, as became apparent after the official findings were revealed. Earnhardt was one of several drivers that made the unfortunate choice not to utilize the gadget back then due to how uncomfortable it was. However, NASCAR made substantial safety enhancements in the years following Earnhardt's death. Sterling Marlin chose to speak up, not to justify himself but to pay tribute to Earnhardt and the principles he stood for. Marlin spoke with composure as he recalled, "Dale was a great driver and a wonderful person. No one can replace him." He also thanked his loved ones for their support during this trying time. Even the most terrible catastrophes may bring about good change, as Marlin's confession demonstrated. It also provided closure to a difficult chapter in NASCAR's history. Upon being asked about his motivation after everything that had happened, Sterling Marlin simply stated, "Dale will always be a part of NASCAR, and I hope what we went through will make this sport better and safer. That's the best way to honor him." By finally speaking out after over 20 years of silence, Marlin conveyed a profound message about strength, dignity, and the wisdom gained from overcoming adversity. This is more than an accident tale. It's a narrative of camaraderie, perseverance, and carrying on a racing legend's work. The legendary Dale Earnhardt, or the Intimidator, has had an incalculable effect on the sport of racing. Along with being a phenomenal driver, he was instrumental in making NASCAR a worldwide phenomenon. Earnhardt is one of the all-time greats in NASCAR history thanks to his 76 victories and 7 titles. He became a fan favorite and respected by his peers for his courageous and risk-taking racing style, which included surviving crashes. Earnhardt revolutionized NASCAR in ways that went beyond his driving prowess. His fearlessness and magnetic personality brought in big-name sponsors, turning the sport into a phenomenon in American popular culture. Through his work, NASCAR was able to attract a new audience, and the iconic number 3 vehicle came to represent the sport's meteoric rise in the 90s. But that terrible day in February 2001 was Earnhardt's greatest legacy. Earnhardt was killed in a horrific collision while trying to save his kid, teammates, and himself in the Daytona 500. The world was startled by his death, which brought attention to the sport's safety issues. As a result, NASCAR made important modifications, including as introducing the head and neck support device, better obstacles, and improved car designs to address these concerns. Although Earnhardt's passing was tragic, it led to improvements in safety features that have prevented many injuries and deaths. His accomplishments in racing and the subsequent advancements in safety have left an indelible mark on the sport, which is still felt today. In the annals of motorsport and in the hearts of fans everywhere, the legend that is Dale Earnhardt will endure indelibly thanks to his tenacity, creativity, and selflessness. Even though he died away over 20 years ago, millions of people still hold him in their hearts. In addition to being an exceptional driver, he embodied the qualities of fortitude, perseverance, and perseverance. Those who were lucky enough to witness him race will always remember the number 3 vehicle and his unforgettable smile, which never fails to motivate them. The Earnhardt family continues the Earnhardt name with Dale Earnhardt Jr. For him, racing is about more than simply winning. It's a way to honor his dad. The life and work lessons Dale Jr. learned from his father, "My dad always said, 'Nothing is impossible if you don't give up,' were profound." Despite the tragic loss of Dale Earnhardt, NASCAR made great strides in safety measures in his honor. A number of safety inventions, such as the head and neck support device and better barriers, were born out of that awful day. A lot of current drivers, including Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott, are really appreciative of Dale's impact and say they wouldn't be racing today if he hadn't made these modifications. The influence of Dale Earnhardt extends far beyond the realm of technology and the track. His admirers will always hold his legacy dear. One fan said, "He wasn't just a driver to me, he was a hero." Others, like Sterling Marlin, had tattoos of the number 3 or attended memorial ceremonies remembering his life. Despite the lingering memories of that tragic day, Marlin chose to carry on the sport that Dale and he both loved. "I believe Dale would want me to carry on and keep the fire alive," stated the man. Not only did Dale Earnhardt win many races, but he also inspired countless others. Life is a race, and you don't always finish first. What matters is that you give it your all, he said, and those words still ring true. In every lap, his memory is remembered, and the strength that comes from passion and determination is a lesson to all of us. At 67 years of age, Sterling Marlin has broken his silence over the fateful day when NASCAR icon Dale Earnhardt passed away. As the chamber was illuminated by gentle light, Marlin reflected on the accident and Earnhardt's enduring impact. Marlin thought back on his time spent as a close friend of Earnhardt's and remembered him as more than only a formidable rival. He was also a loving father and an inspiration to a whole generation. "I can't change the past, but Dale's life was full of meaning," he added. "The images of Earnhardt's famous half-smile and his unrelenting drive are still clear in my mind. Dale was always giving it his all." Marlin reflected on Earnhardt's inspiring words, "Live fully, never stop giving, and love the sport with all your heart." Earnhardt's message spoke to Marlin on a profound level, both as a driver and a tribute to the sport. In the wake of Earnhardt's tragic death, NASCAR instituted new safety measures, including as the head and neck support device and upgraded barriers, to ensure the safety of its drivers. Even though Earnhardt's sacrifice was terrible, Marlin stressed that it saved lives in the end. "He changed NASCAR forever," Marlin remarked, "and that's how he should be remembered." Marlin thanked Earnhardt, explaining, "Thank you for making me a better driver and a better person." He also encouraged fans to savor every moment, telling them not to let remorse cover over the wonderful memories. Looking down from the Daytona circuit, Marlin notices Earnhardt's likeness hanging around, a symbol of the sport's reverence and devotion. "Embrace life to the fullest. Race as if today were your last," Marlin said. Even after passing away, Dale Earnhardt's legacy of bravery and change lives on in NASCAR. That's how Dale would want us to live. The video's viewers are appreciated. Leave a comment, like, and share if you found it entertaining. To make sure you don't miss any new videos, subscribe to the channel and click on the other videos on the screen.